Peace, everyone. How you doing? Welcome to Black Intelligentsia. We got an interview here tonight with my brother. Peace. How you doing, bro?
Peace. I'm James Morgan. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on tonight.
Oh, no problem, no problem. So we're finding the answers in your ancestors. So tell me about the paper you wrote. I know you had a paper that you wrote.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, my recent most well, I publish papers a lot, but and articles. But my most recent one, "Finding Your Fathers: Prince Hall Masonry and African American Genealogy." Basically, it's a summary of my own research into my own family history and how I used African American fraternal records, particularly those of the Masonic order, to trace my own family history. And as a supplement to my already existing family history research that I was already doing.
Okay, so how do you go about doing something like that for the people out there that may have no idea on how to research your family history?
No problem. Well, my first piece of advice to everybody, whenever I get asked that question, is to talk to the people in your family that are already alive, that are older than you. And even the ones who are younger, if you have younger siblings or people in the same age bracket, still sit down and talk to them because, they might have had experiences with grandma and grandpa, whoever else that maybe you just weren't around for. So you want to really try to document everything as much as possible. I always say start with the oldest family members and just ask them. I would say, hey, who was who was your grandparents? Who were the people who kept you in line when you were a child? What was your life like when you were younger? And then just let them talk and get it on video. Write it down. Record it, however you're gonna do it. And after that, then what I'll tell people is, okay, once you get that that snapshot of what was going on, now you want to start researching and documenting what those people were saying. So if grandma and grandpa tell you that they was born in this town in East Texas somewhere, okay, well, they're old enough that you can check the census records to verify. Not saying we don't believe them, but you want to document your family story. So you want to pull the census records with them as children and their parents, et cetera, and take it as far back as you want to go.
Okay, so this the process you took. Could you take us through your process and
No problem.
who's the first person you found in the census and so on and so forth? If you could take us through the
Sure,
chronological.
sure, no problem. God, you take me back with that question. I would say first thing I did. Well, see, I was blessed, man. I'll be honest with you. I was blessed, as I was talking to you a little bit earlier. Um, in that my mother's oldest child. So when I was younger, I got to meet four of my great grandparents. So with that being said, I already knew certain information because of, I could remember meeting some people who are no longer with us. And then when I started having questions and things of that nature, my mom knew a lot of information. My great grandfather is still living. My grandfathers, my grandmother, all of that. So just talking to them and saying, hey, what information can you tell me about the family history? As I got into it with them, particularly on my mother's side, I would start researching, pulling census records back. And I, I always had an interest, particularly in learning more about the men in my family. Being a male, I kind of identify with that energy, obviously. So I wanted to know, who were my male ancestors? What did they do? I discovered, or I won't say I discovered, I learned from my grandfather that I'm a descendant of a man named Reverend William Hightower. Reverend Hightower built the very first African Methodist Episcopal Church in the state of Alabama. It was the pastor. He was the second pastor of the church. So finding out, finding tidbits and information like that really grounded me in understanding that my family and my ancestors were very community-minded people, and that they were very conscientious of there being, Black people, being Africans or of African descent, and it was humbling. Find information like that, and then what you do is, as you go into those census records, you want to look at who's their neighbors, what town are they living in, what's the history behind that town if you're not already familiar with it, who else has family members there, using sites like Facebook and Google Plus and things to network with folks who are researching those same areas. You find some interesting things. Another thing that was really shocking to me in my research was finding out that I'm actually distantly related to Rosa Parks. You know, who we actually today is, if you don't know, today is Rosa Parks' birthday. So I want to say happy birthday to her as well. I discovered that me and her actually had a family connection. You know, so learning that kind of stuff really it's humbling for you. You know, because you realize when you're out here doing certain things that your ancestors have already done some of that work as well. They just pass the torch on to you.
Okay, so let's deal with your namesake. You a third, so let's get a
Yes,
little
sir.
history about the first and the second.
Okay. Well, technically, I should have been the fourth. That's a Snapple fact for you. My great grandfather was James O. Morgan. I'm James R. But my great grandfather's history, I'll be honest with you. Out of all my family lines, I probably know the least about my direct male line, you know, my father's side, going back on that side. Part of the reason being that I don't know what happened exactly. Maybe one of the viewers might hear this story and can break something down for me, but I don't know exactly what happened. But basically, I was able to contact some Morgan relatives. It took a lot of research, a lot of heavy lifting to get that information. And once I did, I realized that it seemed that my great grandfather and his siblings, something happened. I don't know exactly what happened, but there was something that happened where they all were separated, and I don't know if their parents died or there was a fire. I have no idea what happened. Um, but they were separated. My grandfather, James R. Senior, um, him and his siblings were placed in foster care, even though they knew their parents and whatnot. They were placed in foster care, and my granddaddy, he eventually, you know, they all, even though they were in foster care, it was my grandfather. It was the Great Depression era, you know, post World War I era, and he kept in touch with his parents, kept in touch with his siblings. You know, they still tried to keep the unit together, but like I said, it really wasn't. I don't really think it was out of lack of love that his parents put them up for adoption. I think it was more so just the finances just wasn't there at the time. But after that time period, my grandfather actually served in World War II. He was actually nearby when the American forces and the Allied forces captured Mussolini. You know, and it's interesting, you know, because when you sit down and talk to these people who live these kind of experiences, you learn things. Like my grandfather, he when he was in World War II, he he worked as a drill sergeant and whatnot, but he also did prison duty, like watching the Nazi POWs and things. So when you hear things like that, you start hearing little things about how things used to be for those of us who didn't live, like, you know, segregation or whatever. You know, he'll tell me, he'll say, you know, hey, and by the way, it took years for him. I mean, literally, some of this stuff I just found out within maybe the past year. But like he told me, you know, he was wondering sometimes who was the prisoner or who wasn't, because the Nazis and the Italian fascist soldiers who the Americans had captured, sometimes they were getting better food than the black soldiers. And he was looking around like, you know, I thought we won. I thought we were winning the battle. What, you know? So you see how racism and things even spread in the military experience of folks. You know, my going down the line, like I said, you know, from there to me, you know, I just honored that I have a that kind of a namesake in and of itself. You know, my cousins always get mad at me, but I always, you know, I'm his favorite grandchild. You know, that's just a known fact.
Namesake. Uh,
Yes, sir.
so tell me a little bit about the you know, the ties where you found out that your family, um, you know, the picture. Let's talk
Mhm.
about the picture, the actual picture that I made the flyer out of. Now,
Okay, okay.
who is that, and who are the people in there? If you can point out a couple and talk a little bit about that, you
Oh yeah,
know.
yeah, no problem, man. It's actually one of my probably my favorite picture in the world because it's very near to me, near and dear to me because it's probably out of all the pictures that exist of anybody I'm related to, it's probably the oldest one that I have in my collection, my personal family collection. That's actually a picture of my great. So that's four greats, four times great grandparents, Joseph and Jane McBride, with their children out of Pike County, Alabama. It was given to me by my grandfather, my mother on my mother's side, and I would say it's near and dear to me for a couple reasons. Number one, it's near and dear to me, obviously because of his age. Just that in of itself, man. I sit there a lot of times, and because and I'm gonna tell you, like before I even say that, before I had that picture, and see, I had to talk to my mom about this too, because she always was like, "Well, what? Why do you like that picture so much?" Before I had that picture, when I was doing the research, I was starting to accumulate photos of ancestors, but they were all female. So to have a picture of an ancestor that far back, and it was a man, that was like, whoa, to see him, he ain't look like no weak brother or nothing like that, sitting with his family, holding it down. And then the more I learned about him and his life and his children and things, and other offspring outside of my line, it was just really humbling to know that I was descended from such a man, and from others as well, and from the sisters as well, my grandmothers. But I think it's I haven't gone through a African Center Rites of Passage program myself for young men. I'm very big on um, that legacy of men leading their families and things of that nature being passed down generation to generation. So, not only do I think it's an issue when people have, like, if you have a son who doesn't know his father or doesn't have a positive relationship there, I'm like, man, if you don't have a positive relationship with your own father, you don't even understand the importance of having a relationship with your ancestors who are no longer here. So to be able to look them in the eye, even though it's just a photo, but to look them in the eye in of itself was like, whoa. For me, it's I mean, Joe, my granddaddy Joe, was born into slavery. He was a child when it ended, but he was still technically born into slavery. So to be able to look him in the eye, every time I think I'm having a bad day, I'm like, nah, I ain't having no bad day. Um, to give you some background on them and kind of their story on that side of the family, the McBrides, um, as best I can tell, were enslaved by a man named Reverend William Julius McBride. At least that was who their slave owner seems to have been, at the end of at the time of emancipation. Um, Granddaddy Joe's parents, and actually I know who one of his grandmothers is too. His family actually seems to have originated out of his father was apparently born in Maryland in 1830. His mother's mother, her name was Rachel Cade, was born in Virginia in 1815. Now you can imagine black folk in 1815, 1830, 1840 time frame who were living in Virginia, Maryland, wasn't trying to go down to no Alabama by at will for the most part. So you can imagine how they got there. I don't know for certain the circumstances, but you can pretty much take a good guess that they were sold south or however that happened. To give you some background on Granddaddy Joe's father, one thing that I do know about him, aside from the fact that he had his family and everything, that was humbling for me was to know his father voted in the 1867 election, and I have that record with his signature in there. So to find that, it's like, whoa, these people, they took politics and their community being protected, they took that very serious.
What type of signature was it? Was it a scribble, or was it a neat handwriting, or was it an X?
Well, the signature that I saw was it was neat. So I don't know. Again, I don't know if it was just somebody writing his name for him or not. I'd have to go back and look at the records that I have. I don't know if I don't know if his father learned how to read and write or not. I have it noted somewhere, but I don't know off the top of my head. But even that in and of itself, checking those census records, which they did note, was the person literate or illiterate? So even that in itself, to see on the McBride side, I haven't paid attention to it like I probably should have, but I can go back and look to find out. But like on other lines of my family, I've seen people, ancestors of mine, recorded where it said that they were illiterate. From the time they appear in the record to the time of death, there's no indication of them ever learning how to read. But a lot of times when you see that, the mom and dad might not know how to read, but their children, they made sure their children learned how to read and write, whether it was from a church school or a missionary or however they learned. They tried to make sure that their children were getting the education that they can a lot of times. So yeah.
So now, how did you run into your ancestors that was Prince Hall or whatever?
Well, that's an interesting story in of itself. I myself, actually, Joe McBride, Granddaddy Joe, was one. He was the first one I found, which was really exciting and kind of got me started on that research. Because what happened for me was that I serve as the as a associate Grand Lodge historian for the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of D.C., where my membership is in Freemasonry. And a good friend of mine is the Grand Historian for Alabama. Um, and one day he hit me up and was like, "Hey, I found I got some record books, some old stuff. He was trying to digitize and scan and stuff, but he needed help. So I was like, cool, I'll help you. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, man, shoot, I'm the family historian. I wasn't as deep into it as I am now, but I was still getting into to that area of study and research. And as we were going through it, I was actually holding him up, to be honest with you, because I'm really going page by page. I'm not just scanning. I'm page by page. I'm trying to find my folks. And I was actually looking for another ancestor, for Reverend Hightower. I was actually looking for him in the records, and that day I didn't find him. I would find him later as a member of a Masonic lodge. But on that particular day, I was going through, and I found my ancestor, the one you put the picture up of, Joe McBride. I found a record of him as a Prince Hall Mason. And the thing that was so crazy about it was not only was he in that lodge, but his son-in-law, whose name was Toby Townsend, who's my third great grandfather. Like I said, Joe McBride is my fourth great grandfather. Toby Townsend was my third. So that's one. So I found two generations of men in my family in the same lodge at the same time. And that was like, for me to be a member as well was like very humbling in and of itself, because I think that certain traditions like that, whether it's a fraternal organization, you have a lot of folks, family members who, you got generations of pastors or whatever else, teachers. You got a lot of folks who have generations full of teachers. It's like sometimes it's like, okay, did you choose to do that, or was that just something encoded in your DNA, something that just in your spirit, that brought you to something? I don't know, but I like to think it was the spirit of my ancestors that have guided me in different directions over time. So yeah.
Okay. So now, do you do these services for a lot of people, or do you just, you know, freelance?
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, I do freelance for folks. I'm actually currently in the process of pursuing my official genealogy certification. I'm at this time so that I can charge folks and charge people not just to make money, but charge people because they know they're getting certified quality services. Um, you know, to research their family, to break it down, and also because of my academic background, coming as a graduate from Howard University. um, I feel one thing that I bring to the table that a lot, I don't want to say that people don't bring to the table, but I'm gonna just say what I bring to the table is that I know I've learned formally how to study the African experience in the Americas. Okay, and I'll tell anybody in a heartbeat, if you're trying to research certain areas geographically, certain places, I might not be your person. But within at least the United States, and understanding, the Caribbean concept and everything of family history, um, I have a good idea of how to study that so that we can find, like I said in the paper, finding your fathers, finding your ancestry. Where do black folk congregate in the 1880s? If you're looking for your grandmother, well, what were black women in South Carolina doing with their time? A lot of folks just do ancestry research and they'll say, well, they'll look at the census. Like, even if you look at some of these TV shows, they look at census records and they might look at like a slave master's diary or will or something. That's it. And I'm like, okay, you can do that, but these people left behind things too. Whether it's in like I said, in the fraternal organization, the churches that they were members in, even if you look at gravestones, their artwork that they left behind, recipes, all of these things can help you understand better your family history. Even the things, the practices that you do today, you think is just something willy-nilly, but it's not. Or it might not. It might be willy-nilly to you because, oh, well, that's just grandma. I knew grandma. I mean, another person who I found out I was related to, which was crazy, was Dr. Naeem Akbar. So find that out and being in touch with him, going back and forth. Um, I was blessed to get pictures from him that he was kind of like, okay, this is grandma, and I'm like, yeah, but that's your grandma is my great great great. You see what I'm saying? So, you got to value those things because it might not have the same value for you today, but future generations should value it even more if you raise them right.
So how many generations or you know distant cousins do you kind of gather up in your research and in your studies? Because I hear you saying,
Mm-hmm.
the family tree is spreading.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I hear you talk about how it spreads,
Mm-hmm.
how do you really deal with that? Because some people are like cousins, and
Mm-hmm.
especially in the South,
Yeah.
it it get real kind of
Yeah,
crazy.
absolutely. Well, I try to I research as much as possible. I do try to limit the scope of my research geographically, at least. Like, if you my cousin's cousin, let's say, right? I might pursue some information on that side of the family if they're within a particular town or county region to say, okay, I want to get an idea of what was going on in that region, in that area that affected my direct lineage. See what I'm saying? So if you're my cousin's cousin, that's fine, but you're my cousin's cousin, but you might have had a business deal with my great grandfather or whatever else. You know what I'm saying? People have affairs. Step outside their marriage. People have fist fights. People go to jail together. People, serve in wars together. So I try to stick to my main narrative, but within a certain realm. In terms of going back in my ancestral tree, the furthest that I've gotten back was on my father's mother's side. I've gotten back about 12 generations on that lineage, which was a shocker to me that I was able to do that because when I started researching my grandma's side on my daddy's side, I found out my grandmother's people. Well, my grandmother descends from a lineage of free black people in Southern Virginia, and I was able to find their documentation and things and trace them all the way back to the end of the 1600s. It turns out on that lineage they actually started with a black man and a white woman, and that's how they got their freedom because their mother, that woman was white, and so she was free. Therefore, even though her children were of mixed race, her children were free. So that was like, by that point I had already researched a lot of different things, different lineages. Never in a million years thought that I would find that I was descended from anybody that was a free black person, let alone um, a whole family that stretched back to before the American Revolution. I never thought I'd find that, but I did.
Okay, okay. Um, we got the brother Yummy here with us.
Yes,
Peace,
sir.
brother.
Peace, Bo.
There he is. Peace,
Yeah,
peace, brother. Happy to see you or hear you.
yeah. I think you said you was doing some work on him or whatever, so you're gonna reveal it on the show tonight, or have you talked to him about it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah. The brother in the army was very gracious to let me to volunteer to just get a preview of the information that you can find. And I had no idea what we were going to find, but I said I want to show folks exactly the kind of information that you can find on your own, or if you get with me or get with somebody kind of like me to show you those ropes. You'd be surprised at what's out there. The brother Naomi, what was actually very interesting about him was that our ancestral lines don't connect. Like, I'm not saying that me and him are related. However, our stories kind of in part are, which was very shocking to me at first because I was like, wait a second, this brother, his information that he was nice enough to pass on uh, has his people down in Louisiana. Am I correct, brother Naomi?
Correct.
Yes,
Most
sir.
majority of my family is from Louisiana.
Exactly. So, I was getting information from him and whatnot, and I went online and started doing some little bit of research. And what's crazy was that, and I gotta apologize to you again, as a matter of fact, because he was really interested in finding his mother's history, which I got sidetracked with what I'm about to reveal to y'all. So I got to get back to him on that because I promised him I would do that. So I will pursue that. But as I was
It's
researching
the only reason why, because I know there's some French somewhere in that line.
hmm
It's kind of difficult to trace, but carry on.
Yes, sir. So yeah, that was the thing that was crazy. So I'm gonna reveal what I feel is probably the most. I don't want to say the most interesting, but what just the tip of the iceberg. I'll put it like that. Of the brother's heritage. Now, brother Niami, you know your mother, correct? And we know your grandfather was brother Leo Hilliard, right? So I was able to trace on the brother Niami's mother's father's side. I traced him all the way back to his great grandfather, who was born in the early 1800s, a man named Samuel Gray. Now, the thing that was crazy about Samuel Gray that I was able to find out was that it looks like Samuel Gray ain't even from Louisiana, but that's where he died. Samuel Gray apparently, now sometimes what you'll find in some of these records and things is that things conflict or you need to research further or whatever the case may be. So the first piece of documentation that we have on him actually is the fact that he signed up and served in the Civil War. Okay, I'm gonna hit the oh shoot, I can't share the screen, but I actually was able to locate a pension record for Private Samuel Gray, who signed up with the United States Colored Troops to serve in the Civil War. He served as a private and as a steward and a private with the 4th Regiment, Company A, which was heavy artillery, and he signed up in Columbus, Kentucky. Okay, now on this document here, it states that he was born in Brunswick County, Virginia, right? And brother, I'm sending. If I didn't send it over to you, I'm gonna send it over to you tonight. Now, the thing that's interesting about that Brunswick County, Virginia situation is, remember how I told y'all that I came from a family of free black folk? They were in Brunswick County, Virginia. Okay, so when you talk about the Battle of the Crater, if we have any Civil War folks out there, or if you want to go research it, the battle and siege of Petersburg, Virginia, and all that, that's all that area. These are the battles that the brother Niami's family ancestor was involved with. We have that documented. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention I also serve as a volunteer coordinator for the African American Civil War Museum. So when which is here in D.C. where I live. So when I found that, I was like, yo, that's right up my alley. You know, not only were we able to hit the pension record, I was actually able to get the curator of the museum to locate a photo of the actual company that Brother Niami's ancestor was in, and it is quite possible that his great grandfather is in the photo. We don't know for certain, but it's quite possible. We do know the people in it would have known his grandfather at least. So I thought that was very, for me, that was like, wow. At first I was like, phew, because I knew I was coming on the show, so I wanted to have something interesting, and it was great that it was something that I was into, but it also was interesting how, and I told him, I said, hey man, when your ancestor came through guns blazing, some of my ancestors who were in slavery in that area, were being liberated by his ancestors' actions. So, that was humbling for me, and I actually thanked him, and I'd love to know what your reaction is, or if you shared that with your family or not, or anything like that as of yet. I'd love to know, to get some feedback from you.
Yes, I have shared, especially with my mother, and they was all touched and moved that we found that information. Because like I told you, we go back to my grandfather,
Mm-hmm.
and a little bit with my great grandfather. It's kind of sketchy from a lot of stories, but everybody is moved by it, and we're excited about going even deeper into it. So this is just the beginning, but to hear I had an ancestor fight in the Civil War on the side for freedom and liberty, and that's still in our bloodline. That
Mm-hmm.
we're still about justice and about people not being exploited. And as you said before, I think that's the ancestors, the spirit of the ancestors keeping that fire alive.
Yes,
So
sir.
I appreciate you and thank you for doing that.
No problem. No problem at all. You know, and that's the thing. Like I try to get people to understand, man. It's like sometimes it's great finding actual relatives, but even if they're not an actual relative, it's great finding that crossover. Because when I'm looking, cause I'll be honest with you, like the woman who I'm engaged to, who, you know, is about to be my wife, her family is Louisiana, Texas. So I'm thinking if it was going to be any kind of crossover, it might have been with her. So when I saw that his ancestor, based on my research, seems to have been born, you know, Brunswick County, Virginia. Some records say Kentucky, but you know, in that area. And then it seems to me like he retired basically in Louisiana for whatever reason. Was like, oh wow, you know, you know. So it's not. We know we may or may not be actually related. The fact that our ancestors cross paths to some degree, you know, it's not just me and him. Like I said, anybody watching or you know, brother, you know, or yourself, when you research, you'd be surprised at how much people's families cross over in certain aspects. Whether they went to school together, you know, was in the Marines or the Army together, you'd be surprised.
Yeah. So, what other things have you uncovered for the brother? I mean, is it any more like wildness?
Um, I've found. Let's see. The thing that was hard was his grandmother's side. We have to find his grandmother's maiden name. So that particular side right there was a little difficult. So we have to get back on that. I did locate on his grandfather's side though. I was able to locate. Let's see here. Let me count. Okay, so that's Samuel Gray. Samuel Gray was the brother's great grandfather. So that's three greats. I was also able to locate another lineage that stretched back just as far. Now, Brother Niami, have you ever heard of the Sterling family?
No, I have not.
Well, you are you are also a member of the Sterling family as well, so you can add that to your you know, to your archives. We were also able to locate the fact that you are another one of your third great grandparents, Charles Sterling and his wife Fanny. Charles was born approximately in 1830, um, and his wife was born approximately 1845 in St. Francisville. We find them in St. Francisville, Louisiana. Okay, um, so you can do the math in terms of the years of birth and when the Civil War ended. And while we didn't find at this time, I didn't find any conclusive documentation that these ancestors had been slaves. We know that they lived during the time of slavery, at least. Now, and it is quite possible that they themselves were slaves or born into slavery, I should say. Okay. So that right there again gives you further information to track. Now, the one thing I will say, and I say that, and this is one thing I like about folks, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of jealous of people who have that Louisiana uh, background, is that there's a lot of folks out there who research that particular area, you know, with the Creole ancestry, stuff like that. So I actually was able to locate um, several other researchers online who are related to the brother Niami, who already had family trees, which is one of the reasons why this was kind of easy for me to do. So again, you'd be surprised at how many people are actually out there, black and white. Sometimes you'd be shocked at how many people are out there researching your family already. I mean, I'm on here now, looking for the brother, looking, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a second, somebody already did this work. Why am I working so hard? All I have to do is go in there, verify what they found, and you know, like I said, you know, the more people that get into studying their history and placing things online like Ancestry.com or similar websites, you'd be surprised at how much stuff is already out there on your people. You be shocked. And which, by the way, also, Brother Niami, if you didn't, I know I didn't mention to you, as you are a descendant of a United States colored troop soldier veteran, the African American Civil War Museum also has a memorial, which is a nationally recognized, federally endowed memorial here in Washington D.C. that lists all of the black soldiers that fought in the United States Civil War. Your great grandfather's name is listed on there. So next time you're in the nation's capital, I highly encourage you and your family to come visit us, check us out, and check the memorial out. And you also, if you would like, can also get a certificate as well from the museum, thanking you and your family for your ancestor service as well. You are entitled to that. So I want to pass that on to you as well.
Oh yeah, that'll be a good trip.
Yes, sir.
Keep that in my plans.
Yes, sir. So yeah, that, like I said, like I said, finding that Civil War information to me was really interesting. I do want to, I know I kind of shared some stuff. Because I'm gonna tell you something. I was telling the brother, I said, man, I found some good stuff, and he was like, he said he hates surprises, and I'm the same way. So I kind of spoiled it a little bit before I came on the show, because I was like, man, I can't hold it in because I hate that feeling. However, I did want to give some background to some further background rather to the battles and to the history of the regiment. Is that all right?
Yeah. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, and this is actually coming from our curator, Brother Harry Jones. I pulled him in to give a brief summary. The following is information on the regiment, which we verified that Private Samuel Gray served with during the war. The attached photo, which I'm gonna send you, brother, I'm gonna send you the photo I'm talking about. So I don't know if you want to share your screen or whatever the case may be, just so the family can get a visual on this photo I keep talking about. Sending it over to you right now, as well as the pension record, so people can get an idea of.
Who you sending it to?
Send it to you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you should have it now.
Yeah, I got it.
Perfect. So yeah, if you want to throw that up. So the 4th Regiment, United States Colored Heavy Artillery, was organized from the 2nd Tennessee Heavy Artillery volunteers, designated the 3rd Heavy Artillery on March 11th, 1864, and the 4th Heavy Artillery on organized April 26, 1864. They were attached to the District of Columbus 16th Corps Regiment, Department of Tennessee, until August of 1864, and then their service. Now this is when they actually saw actual service after they were trained and everything like that. They were given garrison duty at Fort Hellick in Columbus, Kentucky. Now, see, like I said, they were given garrison duty at Columbus, Kentucky, and where did Samuel Gray say he actually signed up? Okay, so he's there right when they're getting into duty, into active duty. So they were assigned there until June of 1865. Then they moved on to Union City, Tennessee, September 2nd, 1864. And stationed near Fort Donaldson. October 11th, they were moved to Arkansas in June of 1865 and given duty at Pine Bluff until February of 1866. They were mustered out February 25th of 1866. Now, their predecessor unit, and this is something that I would encourage the brother Niami to also check out, and we'll continue to work with him on. They were actually a predecessor unit, which was called the Tennessee Volunteers, that was eventually absorbed into the regular army. So their predecessor unit specifically was the Tennessee Volunteers, 2nd Regiment Heavy Artillery of African descent. Okay, so we know that even before the 4th Regiment, before Private Gray was absorbed into the regular army, that his regiment was serving in Tennessee as volunteers. Okay, and not so that in and of itself is some history that you can research and say, okay, well, what battles did the Tennessee Volunteers get into? What were they doing at that time? We know that they saw combat and things with the Battle of the Crater. Actually, there's a gentleman who I was telling you about off air named Christian Fleetwood. Now, Christian Fleetwood, and we are in Black History Month, so everybody should know who Christian Fleetwood is. He was actually a part of the same regiment that Brother Nyami's ancestor was. And when they were in combat, what ended up happening was that he saved the regimental colors from falling. And he actually was able to prevent some of the troops from retreating, and was deemed a war hero, and was actually one of the first black men awarded the Medal of Honor by the United States military. So again, that should give you an idea of the kind of men that the brother's ancestor was around. And I always like saying, man, if you don't find information on your family member specifically, the next best thing is tell me who their friends are. Tell me who the people they're around are. So we already know. We might not have all the information on Brother Gray as of yet, but we do know that he was around Brother Fleetwood. So that in and of itself should say something about, once again, as he was saying, his ancestors stepping up to the plate and not staying at home and everything, and saying, nah, we need to go fight for liberation at this point. And he put his life on the line and made it out. As far as we could tell, we made it out in one piece, and went on to have a prosperous life and family after that. So, you know, that in and of itself, I think, is worthy of praise.
So now tell us, how would or what would be a good way to document our family today, so in the future we can be found, you know, easier, and people can tie into us. If you could help us with that information for those that may not know how to actually document themselves.
No problem. Well, the first thing I say is your actual documents are important. Okay. You know, I was flipping out, man, when I actually lost, and my mother would kill me. I lost my high school diploma. Right? Now that might sound like a minor thing to most people, but the thing is, my grandkids might want to know where I went to high school. You know, so you know, my college degrees, you know, my Masonic stuff, my awards and things. Those things do matter because they mark time, they mark places that you were. You know, anything you've published that was a newspaper article or whatever the case may be. You know, photographs of family events. You know, we live in the era of computers, so I always say, man, the internet can be your friend. You know, Ancestry.com family tree is very, very helpful. Also having personal, like having a safe in, you know, in the home, or a safe deposit box for family heirlooms. We have to get back into that habit of family heirlooms. You know, like some photos and things that I might have that you might see me post. I don't have the original in the house. I might have it in a safe deposit box somewhere or something like that. And, you know, and make sure that the information is somewhere safe. That way, if something happens to me, the family can still have access to those things. Okay. You got a lot of people who nowadays are getting into actually videotaping themselves, as we're doing now. This right here is marking time and space. Okay. So, you know, having a YouTube channel or doing video blogs, and you can do private ones even, that's just for your family. You know, I know I saw one sister, man, that she was actually a genealogist, and she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. But what she decided to do with her last few months of life, because she knew she was about to have a grandchild that she wasn't really going to be here to see, she videotaped herself every day just talking, not only about family history, but just about her life and situations she went through, to pass on information to her next generation that she wasn't even going to live to see. So stuff like that, you know, it might sound kind of corny to some people, but I think that stuff really does matter, man. You know, in this day and age, there's no reason why, if you're alive today, your grandkids or great grandkids shouldn't be able to go online somewhere or on somebody's old computer and dust it off and say, hey, what was granddaddy talking about? You know, when he was in this black conscious stuff, what was he really thinking? You know, they could sit there and listen to you, even though you've long since passed on.
Yeah, true that. I do a lot of YouTube and then blog talking, so hopefully my record out there for my yet to be found children or whatever.
There you go. But see, what I would do, man, I would just go back. If I was you, I'd go back and try to get the actual file and just have it on a drive somewhere or whatever you want to, however you want to play it. And you know, and like I said, if the children pop up one day for you or whatever, you know, hey, look, take this. You know, this is my part of my legacy I'm leaving behind for you. You know, what little bit I could have. You know, I'm very into, and it might sound like, even like Facebook, Facebook can be such a good resource for people years later, because it's actually something that you're producing. You know, your LinkedIn profiles, things of that nature. You know, having your resume. Like, one thing that I got into also with my current family members is, hey, Pat, send me your resume. I mean, if you need a job, if I can help you out, great. But give it to me, that way I can attach it to something with your name. That way we know what your profession was, what your background was, what your certifications were and things. I mean, I was shocked, man, that to learn that I had family members that was going to college way back in the early 1900s when a lot of black folks were being oppressed and things. Finding out that I had ancestors that actually like I have relatives that built churches. I'm like, okay, even if they didn't have an actual certification from somebody's school, they still knew how to build a church that's still standing. Some of us can't do that today, So I mean, you got to look at everything, newspapers, clippings. My ancestor Reverend Hightower, when he built that church in Alabama, it cost $8,000, and this was in 1908. So when you adjust that for inflation, you're talking some big money, okay? But he did it and got it done, So artwork, anything, it is all, to me, it's all valuable.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So yeah, but the other thing too, I would say that I think is also important, man, is talking to not just your immediate family, but also talking to your friends, because like I said, if you from certain areas, like a lot of people who come from Chicago today have ancestry in Louisiana and Mississippi. There's a lot
Well,
of
it's
folks
funny how people migrated up north.
Yeah.
People from Arkansas, Memphis, and stuff went kind of Chicago, Detroit.
Yep.
And people from Atlanta, Alabama, and stuff kind of went,
New York, Philly,
New York, so on.
Yes, sir.
So.
Yes, sir. And see, a lot of that had to do. See, we don't travel the same way we used to back in the day. Back then, a lot of that stuff was partially dictated by the train lines. And for us as black folk, you down in the cotton field somewhere, some white man is coming down to you and saying, "Look, I got a factory up here. You and your three brothers, why don't y'all come up here and work for me? Y'all save your money, right? You can send for your family later." And that's what a lot of folks did. But their destination a lot of times wasn't really just picking a spot on the map. They're looking at the train and they just jumped on. I mean, there was a train line that ran from my mother's ancestral home in Alabama that ran right to the town where I'm from. And that's where my grandmother got off at. And that train line just stopped running in the 90s. So, and I actually got the chance to ride on it when I was a child. So, those kind of things matter. People did migrate to the same places a lot of times. So when you talk to your family members, even your spouse, you'd be surprised sometimes at the connections.
Okay. So now, have you ever had a chance, or do you have a link to deal with like the slave ships and things of that nature? So they had a movie. Yeah, they had a movie came out here a while ago about the sister taking the documentation of the people that was coming up. I forget what it was called. I don't know if it was on BET or whatever, but it was a sister. She was educated and she was writing all the names of the slaves when they was getting ready to go to Liberia.
I'm not sure about that one, but there is a site that you can check out. And actually, I'm happy you talked about that, because I think we can transition into talking about the slave trade a little bit more as it relates to Ancestry. You can actually go on www.slavevoyages.org. It's the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database. This is a site that's sponsored by Emory University and the National Endowment for the Humanities, where you can actually begin to get an understanding of how the slave trade worked in terms of which groups of people, or really which ports in Africa were connected to which ports in the Western Hemisphere, to get a better idea of what your ancestral background may or may not be, certain areas. And then also you have to understand too, certain ports in Africa were exporting to areas in America at different time periods. So that's another big thing that a lot of folks who are interested in like doing DNA research and stuff, you have to understand that dynamic, and also know how long your family's been here. Because like my family, for instance, one thing I know about certain lineages of my family have been here a very long time. I can document it. So when you document it, you trace it back, you say, okay, they were in this area at this time. There's a good chance that I have Igbo heritage, or that I have heritage from this area here, because these are the different tribal groups in Africa that they were bringing over at that time. And what I have found, because I have done DNA testing stuff as well, I found personally in my research has been very consistent with the documented research I have. I compare that to the DNA research that I have, and it marries up more often than not. So, I highly encourage people to do that kind of stuff because to me it's good to know where you come from and get a better idea of what the makeup of you is. And I think Ancestry can be very addictive because it's the story. It really is the story of you. So yeah.
Okay. Well, we got some sisters on the line over here.
Hmm.
If y'all would like to talk, ask some questions, y'all welcome to open up the mics and do so.
Yeah, please.
Hello, 586. How y'all sisters doing? You don't have to hit one or none. You just got to unmute yourself. Hmm. Guess they not listening. Unable to talk.
Uh,
So, Nyami,
Hey, brother, what's going on?
peace. How you doing, sister?
Hey, I'm online. Which one of the sisters on there? I think that's when her daughter had called to come on. Hey, Pete. I was hearing brother how to go back and get the information to pull up the family tree. You know, we was to my family Mississippi, how to go by what evidence we need to collect to pull the family tree. So that was good information. I'm gonna call my twin sister and I'm gonna call about that for one day. I'm gonna call down stuff and see who has some whole paper down there like my auntie and see what case she give it to go put and search up. I mean, like information you have for the brother online. Yeah. I
okay.
called it just and I was I've been there. What happened to yeah, today is Thursday. What happened to the lesson the night?
Didn't do one. Got caught up. Me and Ron didn't link up good. Did you hear anything she said, brother?
I heard her
I
ask
heard her ask.
what information she needs to research her tree. Did I hear her right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the main rule of thumb I would always tell people is if you know who all four of your grandparents are, and if your four grandparents were born before 1940, you can trace your ancestral heritage, particularly if they were born in the United States. The reason why that is because there's privacy laws and things dictate that a record can't be public for public use, and it varies depending on what kind of record it is, like the census records, birth records, social security records. They become public knowledge after a certain point, but that's deemed upon, I think it's like 70 years, something like that. So right now, the most recent census record that's available is 1940. So if you want to, if you know all four of your grandparents' names, and for your grandmothers, if you know their maiden names, um, and you have an rough idea of where they were born, if you can answer those questions, in general, you can trace your family heritage. Ancestry.com is a very good resource. Like I said, Facebook. I have to shout out Our Black Ancestry, which is probably the largest genealogy group on Facebook. There's over 26,000 members, which I'm actually one of the administrators for. You'd be surprised at what you'll find by just putting that information out there alone on the internet and just Googling some stuff. If you know your great grandparents, even better. You'd be surprised. And if you know the towns where they were from, you start researching the town and you say, well, wait a second, my last name is Beecham. There's a lot of Beechams in that town. Okay, well, start researching them and find out. They all one big family at the end of the day a lot of times. Or they coming off the same plantation or whatever. If you find some white Beechams, guess what? That might be your cousins too. So you just got to keep, just leave no stone unturned, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Like I said, the internet, social media can be your friend. If you don't hook up with me, you can hook up with somebody else who knows that area of the country that you're researching, and you'd be surprised, man. There's a lot of people out here who will help you. Some people might charge, professional folks, but there's a lot of people who can help you out, little to no cost or free of charge at all. They just pass on advice and you just follow it, and you'd be surprised at how successful you'll be.
I come to find out that obituaries is good too.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And you know, and I thank you because I didn't mention obituaries. Obituaries are an amazing source of information. Um,
'Cause they tell you about the ones that passed, who they left behind, and who preceded them in death.
yes, sir.
You
Yes,
get
sir.
all,
Absolutely.
Right, right.
you know.
Absolutely.
So if you
Yeah, I
if
met
you
them.
if you
Did I hear
go,
you say you was kin to Rosie Park?
I'm sorry.
Did I hear you say you was kin to Rosie Park? I'm trying to think which one. Brother Carl, which one of them he said he was kin to?
Yeah, Rosa Parks. Yeah, I found out I was distantly related to Rosa Parks. Not super close, but again, when you start researching back and back and back, you say, wait a second, I had direct ancestors that lived literally next door to Rosa Parks' people. They all lived on the same street. I visited there. I'm actually in touch with her close relatives, and this was about maybe 6 months ago. I got to meet with them, and they pulled out a family tree, a handwritten family tree that was that Rosa Parks actually wrote herself. I got to handle and touch, and she had my side, my people on there, which was like that was humbling, to say the least. I mean, I never in a million years would have thought that I had any kind of, even though it was a distant connection. Um, I can document not only that our relatives, we share relatives. I can document, like I mentioned earlier about like Masonic records and stuff. I can document her grandfather founded a lodge with my ancestors, and they were friends. They were, like I said, they were neighbors. They had property transactions between each other. So you find those kind of things, and they built a school. Again, the families, the black families in that area, there's only a couple of them, built a school together. It's all on the same street. The houses and the school and the lodge is the same street. And I've been there and saw it myself. I got pictures of it. So um, finding that kind of information, it really humbles you. And I think for the younger folks, if you got any younger listeners out there, or whatever, I think it gives them a chance to be to attach themselves to a legacy. Because if you out here in the world today and you think you don't have a legacy, you're sadly mistaken. If you might not know it, but you do have a legacy, and you owe your ancestors that much to carry that torch forward the way you can.
Yeah.
yeah, like I was saying with the obituaries, the census don't always get a child that then passed away. It don't
True.
get a chance to record that. So then you got children that is unrecorded and stuff, and their life is over with, and it doesn't proceed on. But it give you a chance to understand a little
Very,
bit more.
very true. May I ask, where's the sister? Where's she calling from? What area of the country you calling from?
Michigan,
Michigan. Okay. Where's your family from? Like your family background? Where they from?
Mississippi.
Just Michigan. No southern roots at all.
She said
Not
Mississippi.
Oh,
from
Mississippi. Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So see, if you're coming from Mississippi, you definitely want to check out um, Louisiana records because you have a lot of people moving back and forth between Louisiana and Mississippi. You might have to start, depending on what area of Mississippi you're talking about and what time period. Um, you definitely want to check that out. Believe it or not, you want to check out both Union and Confederate records. Believe it or not, to try to track some of your family members down, possibly. Um, you know, uh, like I said, whatever town your people come from, if you know that everybody in your family was at Salem Baptist Church, side of the rock, on the road to Zion Missionary Church or whatever the case is, go there, go to the graveyard and look around. And if your last name Jackson, you see a bunch of Jacksons, take pictures because they're probably your people.
Yeah, right. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem.
I have to,
No
because
problem.
I know both of my grandparents' names, and I know both of my great grandparents' names.
Perfect. So if you know if you know your great grandparents' names and you have an idea where they're from, you're ahead of a lot of people. Trust me. Trust
Yes,
me on that.
we all was from Mississippi. We all stayed up. It's called the Kirkwood headquarters.
It's the what headquarters?
The Kirkwood.
Kirkwood. Okay. Yeah. So see, like you already ahead of the game. Also another thing I kind of touched on, but didn't really get deep into. Check out black newspapers too. You'd be surprised, man. You find, I mean, I had a situation with my in-laws where I didn't know, but found out they had an ancestor who had been lynched, and it was a whole big thing at the time, of him being lynched and what happened and the family's property and stuff. It was a whole big thing that, people just didn't talk about because they were traumatized by those things. So definitely check out the black newspapers as well. That's also a great resource to get an understanding, whether it's like the Christian Recorder, the Washington Bee here in D.C. You had the Tribunes, you had all kind of stuff. The New York Talk newspaper, So yeah, so definitely.
Okay, I gotta write it down. I'm trying to find these kin people up here. I think they the oldest, they the Kirkwoods. They up here, I think they're like 80 something. So I'm gonna get back down to Mississippi and get the lady, give me their numbers so I can call, because the ones up here came from Mississippi and they know everybody.
There you go.
I'm glad I downloaded that to get that information. So I'm glad to, because I've been trying to track them down so I can find out who is my great, 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 great grandparents. And the lady told me that the ones here, what's going on. I kept saying, well, how am I going to get these people? How do I go by getting them? I cannot find them.
Well, are you on like Ancestry.com or do you use there's also another site. Now see, Ancestry, they do charge. I'm not on their payroll or anything like that. I personally feel like it's worth it, if you're serious, to pay the little $20 or whatever to find such great information. But you can also use FamilySearch.org, which is free for now because the Ancestry did purchase them. So get on there now while it's free. Huh?
No, I'll say thank you.
Yeah, no problem, sister. No problem at all.
Family Search. Yeah. Or
yes, ma'am, and that's a free site.
okay, it's free now. I'm going to get on there. FamilySearch.org. I'm going to get on there and I'm going to put their names in too. Can I come up with?
There you go. And try, and also too, when you're researching female ancestors, try to make sure that you use maiden names if possible. That'll help you out a lot.
I know I didn't maiden name. That's what I'm telling you. It's the Kirkwood headquarters.
There you go.
Those are Kirkwoods. The Kirkwoods got married into the Miller family, so I go put in Kirkwood, and I go put in Miller, and I put in Joe, because those are all the families named Kirkwood, Joe, Miller, and Ideas. Once I put in there, then I can go put in some names, FamilySearch.org. So
you said Millers?
Yep, Millers, Kirkwood,
okay.
Joe, and Ideas.
Well, out of curiosity, what town or what county?
Mississippi is let me see. Think of the county.
Well, if you don't know off top right now, you can hit me. I'm on Facebook and all that stuff. So you can hit me later. Like I said, if you have any questions, also I encourage you to join Our Black Ancestry on Facebook as well. And you can definitely get some help there.
Okay, I'm gonna give her the card to send me that stuff, and then I can go on and look at search. But that's
magnificent.
Hey, put a link up in the event.
An event.
I'm telling the brother to get a link to the Facebook whatever page or group or whatever, and put it up in the event page.
No problem.
Yeah, then I can get it and go and search. Because I need to know. I need to know who my great grandmother, my great grandfather, my great great grandmother, great grandfather, because it was the Kirkwood headquarters, and I just was a little girl. But I was a little girl, but you know what? I still know their names. I was about 1 or 2. I still remember my great-grandmother's name. I still remember my great-great-granddad's name. I remember all their names, and I've been remembering their names since I was 2. So I still know their name. I just didn't know where to go and put it up to get the resource. Because me and my 10 people in the city, we've been trying to see how can we find, my daughter, find the resource. That's my daughter.
Magnificent. Thank you for calling in. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah. I'm glad I got on tonight because I got the information now. That Brother Carbon and make sure you can get it where you can put it up in the group. Then I can go and find it. I can do some searching.
Magnificent.
Well, it's in the group and I shared it on my wall too.
Okay, I'm gonna look when I get up in the morning. I just got in. I just try to make sure I listen. If I think about this thing walked off, yeah, she did. Yeah, well, I'm gonna go and share it with her too because I think that let's see, she
I
just
got a lot of friends in here.
people. Huh?
So I got a lot of friends in here.
Yeah,
You know, the funny thing is, that's like I had a brother on my father's side. You know, I guess, before my mother and father got married. And he called up one year back in like 94. So as the years went by, he was actually located in Chicago. And so a woman from the town went to the post office and sent off a piece of mail. And he get the mail and like, hey, I'm from that town. My father from there. So she asked and he named my father. So she
Wow.
come back to the neighborhood, and you know how it is. Same way, like you say, certain people from certain towns, like this around Cabrini Greens in Chicago. So this is Cedric. So she come back, she tell my cousin, cause everybody from the same town, so they talking. And this is some guy at the post office said, you know, your cousin them dead as they dead. So I was like, I gotta go check this guy out, and I went down there and looked, and I was like, uh-oh. He looked like my father, almost spitting image. So,
Yeah, you'd be
that's
surprised. I mean, that's a big thing, man. Like finding siblings and things. I mean, you'd be so surprised at the stuff that comes out of families. I'm not even gonna put business out there, folks that I've worked with, man. But I've had people who just wanted to find like, trace themselves back to like the Civil War era or something like that. And as I research, I'm like, yeah, man, you do know that you have like other uncles and aunties, right? They're like, what? I found people who didn't know that they had siblings that was put up for adoption. I had one person I work with that had a sister that what happened was her mom was a teen parent back in the day, and that wasn't acceptable or whatever. She had a baby and just put it up for adoption, never mentioned it to anybody. And now this person's 40-something years old, finding out for the first time they have a sibling that's been trying to find family members. So I think it's very important when you talk about community building and upliftment. The family is the essential unit of the community, and when you talk about it from a broader perspective as a community, I think we as a people, we need to be linking ourselves, understanding our lineage, going back to Africa and other places as well, to get a better idea of not only for your mental health but also even your physical health as well. Get a better idea of what your family's medical backgrounds are. That way, when you get to a certain age, to go get your checks for all these different ailments and things. Some stuff can be possibly prevented by early detection, but you didn't know that your grandfather came from a line of people that had this disease. But you might have been able to get it prevented. So definitely do that. Which I make sure I do as well. I try to document how folks died. It's very important.
Yeah.
I know the name of the county is Choctaw County.
Choctaw County, Mississippi.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I've heard of it. I don't know too much about it, but I promise you, if you go on, like I said, Our Black Ancestry or some similar groups on Facebook, even if you just go in and look up Mississippi genealogy, groups or whatever, I promise you that you will find people who are researching Choctaw County who would know more about it than I do.
Okay, yeah. Okay. You put it up there on the wall, and I'm gonna get a look. I can write it all down. Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
I down the website, so I know where to look. Ancestry.com.
Mm-hmm.
I got to go look it up because Choctaw County, it's just like the whole little area in the Kirkwood headquarters. It's always over there with Kirkwood, and then if you go around up to Hill Springs, that's like the middle quarter. And if you Going right, the Joe was up to the right, Kirkwood Street, all up down the road, Mills up that way, then the Otterberry was down on 12. So they like, everybody is in this little group. And I'm like, wow. So it's not that it shouldn't be that hard to find. We just didn't know how to get the resource. They were trying to get the tree together, but they didn't know how to exactly go past that point. You know, down in Mississippi, they don't have a lot of resources. When you get in the city and you know how to get up on stuff, you can, if you, like you said, if you know names, you just need to know the resource. Carla's trying to put that up there, and I ain't gonna, when I get up in the morning, I'm gonna get up, get my pills for pills, and I'm gonna get doing some searching and looking. See, so I can see where my great-great-grandparents were like. I am not a clue. I know what my grandmama's I know my grandmama's mama and my grandmama's daddy look like, but I need to know what my granddaddy's mama and daddy look like.
Well,
I haven't seen them.
I post the link and stuff, and I think the brother gonna have to, you know, we had him here for about an hour or so. So we're gonna call it a day, people. I appreciate the information. I appreciate you, you know, blessing the show with you know, the knowledge and stuff you done gained about how to do these things.
No
And
problem.
hopefully it does some good in the community, because a lot of people do need to go search out some stuff. I believe I got a sister out there, and you know,
Hey,
I don't know. I might search her down. I search my brother down. So
there you go. There you go. You know, it's beautiful, man. And like I said, you know, I appreciate you having me on tonight, man. For real, I love what you're doing for the people, man. And you know, definitely, you know, I you know, support you 1,000%, man. So I greatly appreciate you having me on.
all right. With that said, we're gonna say
Thank you.
peace, good night to
All right,
everybody, and
everyone.
see y'all later.
Peace, family.
Peace.